My mother kept a ledger of everything she ever did for me, and somehow the balance was always mine to pay. She never kept one for my sister, for Brooke. Love was free. It came with no invoice, no interest, no quiet reminder at the dinner table of all that had been spent. For me, love was a loan, and I had been making payments on it for 40 years. I am the one who does the books. In my family, in my work, in every room I have ever walked into. I'm the one who balances what is owed against what is paid. So I want you to understand that when I finally sat down and added up my whole life, line by line, the math was not hard. I had given everything. I had been given a bill. The night I finally closed that account, my mother was standing in her kitchen with her hand out, the way she always stood, certain I would fill it the way I always had. For the first time in 40 years, I did not. I want to tell you what it cost me to say one small word in that kitchen, and what it cost her. But to understand why no was the hardest thing I have ever said, you have to understand how long I had been saying yes. So let me start at the beginning. My name is Dana. I am 42 years old, and I keep the books for small businesses in a quiet town in southeastern Ohio. I spend my days with other people's numbers, finding the place where the ledger does not balance, the missing entry, the quiet leak no one noticed. I am good at it because I have done it my whole life. Long before I ever balanced a business, I was balancing a family, carrying the weight no one else would pick up, covering the shortfall, making the books look right so no one had to see how uneven they truly were. There is a strange comfort in numbers, if you grew up the way I did. Numbers do not have favorites. A column adds up to the same total no matter which child you are, no matter who the light falls on. I think I became an accountant because it was the one place in the world where what I put in came back out exactly equal, where fairness was not a feeling someone could deny me, but a law that could not be argued with. I spent my whole career inside the one fair system I had ever known. It took me 40 years to run the numbers on the system I was actually born into. Before I go on, I would love to know where you are listening from tonight. Leave the name of your town in the comments. And if you have ever been the dependable one, the strong one, the child who was loved for what you could carry instead of for who you are, then stay with me. This story is for you. I have one sister, Brooke. She is 3 years younger than me, and from the day she was born, she was the one the light fell on. I do not say that with bitterness. It is simply the weather I grew up in. Brooke was the pretty one, the funny one, the sensitive artist who felt things so deeply that the rest of us were expected to arrange ourselves around her feelings. And I was the other one, the capable one, the one who did not need anything, because needing things was Brooke's job, and being fine was mine. My mother had a phrase she used my whole childhood, and she said it like a compliment. She would say, "I never have to worry about Dana." She said it when I made my own lunches at 7 so she could spend the morning with Brooke. She said it when I got myself to school, paid for my own field trips with babysitting money, taught myself to drive in a church parking lot because there was never time to teach me. I never have to worry about Dana. I wore it like a medal for years before I understood what it actually meant. It meant I had been quietly excused from her care. It meant that being strong had cost me the right to ever be held. I have one memory that holds the whole of my childhood inside it. I was 9, and I had a part in the school play, a small one, 2 lines, but I had practiced them for a week in the bathroom mirror. The night of the play, Brooke had a cold, not a fever, not anything, a runny nose and a sad face. My mother stayed home with her. She told me I understood, didn't I? Because I was the big girl and Brooke needed her, and I would be fine up on that stage by myself. I said my 2 lines to an audience that did not contain a single person who belonged to me. I found my own way home in the dark, and when I came in, my mother asked me how it went without looking up from Brooke's forehead, and I said it went fine, because that was my line, the only line that was ever really mine. Fine. I had been saying it since before I understood it was a lie. When our father died, I was 26. He was the only one who ever seemed to see me. And when he was gone, the last person who might have balanced the books left the room. After the funeral, my mother sat me down, not Brooke, and told me she would need me now. Brooke was fragile, she said. Brooke was going through a hard time. I would have to be the strong one. I was 26 and I had just lost my father, and no one once asked if I was going through a hard time, because I was the one you did not have to worry about. So I became the strong one, officially. The way you take a job. I did my mother's taxes every spring. I set up her bill payments. When her roof leaked, I found the contractor and I paid the deposit. When Brooke needed money, and Brooke always needed money, the call came to me, framed as a favor to our mother. Your sister is in a tight spot. You know she is not good with these things the way you are. Could you just help her out this once? This once happened 11 times over 15 years, and I kept every receipt. Not because I plan to use them, but because keeping the books is simply what I do. I have a folder. The number in it would buy a house. I remember the 7th loan most clearly, because that was the one that should have woken me up, and did not. Brooke had fallen behind on a car she could not afford, a car nicer than mine. And the call came at 10 at night, my mother's voice tight with worry. They were going to repossess it in the morning. Could I wire the money tonight? I was tired, and I had work at 6. But I got up, and I moved the money, because that is what I did. The next week, Brooke posted photographs from a weekend trip to the coast, the kind of trip I had not taken in years because I was always covering someone else's emergency. I said nothing. I told myself she deserved a little joy. I had become so practiced at explaining away my own erasure that I could turn even that into a story where no one had done anything wrong. I told myself this was love. I told myself that a family is a place where the strong carry the weak, and I was glad to be strong enough to carry. What I did not let myself see, for the longest time, was that the carrying only ever went one way. When my marriage ended, quietly, painfully, in my 30s, my mother's response was to ask whether I could still make it to Brooke's birthday dinner that weekend. When I was sick, truly sick, the winter I had pneumonia and could barely stand, no one brought me soup. I drove myself to the doctor. I always drove myself. I never have to worry about Dana. That is the thing about being the dependable one. The reward for carrying the weight is that everyone stops noticing it is heavy. You become so good at being fine that your pain stops registering as real, even to you. You start to believe that your needs are a kind of selfishness, that wanting to be cared for is a debt you have no right to call in. And so you keep paying, and you call the paying love, because if it is not love, then you have to ask yourself what exactly you have been doing all these years. And that question is too frightening to hold. So you do not hold it. You pick up the next thing they hand you instead, and you tell yourself that this is what a good person does. And you go to bed tired in a way that sleep does not fix, the particular exhaustion of a person who has spent another day being useful to people who would not think to ask if she was all right. The favoritism was not always loud. That is what made it so hard to name. My mother would never have said she loved Brooke more. She believed, I think, that she loved us the same. But love is not what you feel. Love is what you do. And what my mother did told a different story than what she believed. When Brooke got married, my mother spent $8,000 she did not have on the wedding and cried about how proud she was. When I got married, she gave us a card and told me she knew we did not need any help because we were sensible. When Brooke's children were born, my mother moved in for a month each time to help. When my own miscarriage happened, she sent a text that said, "These things happen for a reason. and then asked if I had finished her taxes. I used to do a terrible kind of math in my head at family gatherings, adding up the minutes. How long my mother's face lit up when Brooke walked in, against the brief nod I got. How many questions she asked Brooke about her life, her art, her children, against the 0 she asked me, because my life was a settled account she had stopped checking. I would catch myself doing it and feel ashamed, as if noticing the imbalance were a worse sin than the imbalance itself. That is the final trick of being the unfavored child. You are trained so well that you police your own resentment harder than anyone else ever could. You become the warden of your own silence. There was one person who saw it, my Aunt Carol, my father's sister. She did not say much, but once, years ago, at a family barbecue, she watched my mother fuss over Brooke for an hour while I cleared every plate and refilled every glass. And on her way out, she squeezed my arm and said low, just for me, "You know it's not right, what they do to you. Don't let them tell you it's love." I brushed it off at the time. I was so deep in the system that an outside voice almost could not reach me. But I never forgot it. And in the worst weeks, when I wondered if I was imagining the whole thing, the memory of Carol's hand on my arm was sometimes the only proof I had that I was not. Sometimes the only thing keeping a person sane is one witness who refused to call the harm by its pretty name. The slights climbed over the years, and they climbed in a particular direction. They moved from my time to my money to the things that were most truly mine. First, it was the hours, the endless hours of being the family's unpaid accountant and handyman and crisis line. Then it was the money, the 11 loans that were never called loans, the quiet draining of an account I had built one careful deposit at a time. And then, 2 years ago, it reached for the last thing I had, the thing I had protected through a divorce and a lifetime of giving everything else away. My mother decided I should sell my house. She did not say it like a demand. She never did. She said it over coffee, the way she said everything, as though she were doing me a kindness by including me in a decision that had already been made. She was getting older, she said. She did not want to be a burden, she said, which is always what people say right before they hand you the heaviest thing they own. The plan, as she described it, was simple and reasonable, and it took my breath away. I would sell my house, I would move into hers, into my childhood bedroom, and I would care for her as she aged. And the family home, the house I would be living in and maintaining and paying the taxes on, would go to Brooke when my mother passed, along with whatever savings were left. Because Brooke had the children, you see. Brooke had a family to provide for. And I would be fine. I was always fine. I sat there with my coffee going cold, and I understood, finally and completely, the arithmetic of my entire life. I was not a daughter. I was an asset. I was the dependable line on the family balance sheet, the one you could draw against forever because it never asked for anything back. My mother was not planning to leave me the house because she did not think of the house as something a person like me would need. People like me did not need things. People like me were fine. The inheritance would go to the daughter she worried about, and the duty would go to the daughter she did not. And in her mind, this was not cruelty. It was just how the books had always balanced. It was just the weather. And the most chilling part, the part I could not stop turning over afterward, was how reasonable she made it sound. She was not gloating. She was not being deliberately cruel. She genuinely believed she was being fair, because in the economy of our family, fairness had always meant that Brooke received and I provided. To her, asking me to sell my house and tend her old age while my sister inherited the proceeds was not a betrayal. It was simply the natural conclusion of a sentence she had started writing the day I was born. I never have to worry about Dana. She had said it so many times that it had become true, not because I did not need worrying about, but because she had decided, once and for all, that I never would. I did not say no that day. I want to be honest with you about that, because this is the part of the story I am least proud of and the most human. I sat there, 40 years old, and I felt the old pull, the gravity of being the good daughter, and I heard myself say that I would think about it. I drove home to the house she wanted me to sell, and I sat in my own kitchen, in the quiet I had built and paid for, and I came within an inch of saying yes. One more time, the biggest yes of my life, but only the latest in a lifetime of them. You have to understand how strong that pull is if you have never lived inside it. It does not feel like weakness. It feels like love and duty and being a good person. Every reason to say yes wore the face of virtue. She is your mother. She is getting old. Family takes care of family. Who would you even be if not the one who shows up? That last question was the one that nearly finished me, because I had built my entire self on being that person. And if I stopped, I genuinely did not know what would be left. It is a terrifying thing to suspect that the only version of you anyone has ever valued is the version that costs you everything. I sat with that fear for a long time. I almost let it win, because it was familiar, and the familiar can feel like home even when it is the thing that is hurting you. What stopped me was the folder. I went and I got it, the folder where I keep the books, and I sat at my table and I did the thing I do best. I added it all up. Not just the money, though the money was staggering. I added up the years, the lunches I made myself at 7, the school play I performed to an empty seat, the father I grieved alone, the pneumonia, the miscarriage, the divorce I went through while still showing up to Brooke's birthday dinner, the 11 loans, the taxes, every spring for 20 years. I laid my whole life out in a column, the way I lay out a client's accounts, and I looked at the total. And for the first time, I let myself see what I had been refusing to see for 40 years. In my work, when an account will not balance, there is always a reason, and the reason is never random. Somewhere there is an entry that was made wrong on purpose, a place where money was moved out of one column and into another, and the books were dressed up to hide it. I had spent 20 years finding those places for other people, and sitting there that night, I finally ran the same audit on my own family, and I found the falsified entry. It was me. From the very first year, I had been the line they moved everything into, the account they drained while telling everyone the books were fine. I had even helped them hide it, because I was the one who kept the books, and I had made my own erasure look balanced. The account did not balance. It had never balanced. I had been pouring myself into a relationship that was structured, from the very beginning, to take from me and call it love. And the final entry, the sale of my own house, was not the end of the ledger. It was the moment the ledger swallowed me whole. There would be nothing left of me that was mine. I would have given them even the door I closed at night. I thought about something my father said to me once, near the end, when he was the only one who still saw me. He took my hand and he told me that I was not the strong one. He said I was the one they leaned on so hard that no one ever noticed I was the one holding everyone up. And that one day I would have to decide whether to keep standing there until I broke or to step out of the way and let them learn what they had been leaning on. I was young, and I thought he was being morbid, and I changed the subject. I have thought about those words more in the last 2 years than in the 20 before. He knew. He had watched it happen to me from the inside of the same family, and he had tried, with the last of his strength, to hand me the key. Sitting at my table that night, with my whole life in a column in front of me, I finally turned it. I decided I was going to step out of the way. For a few weeks, I prepared myself. Not with a weapon, not with a plan to expose anyone, because there was no one to expose. Everyone already knew. Brooke knew she was the favorite. My mother knew which daughter she worried about and which she did not. There was no secret to reveal. There was only a word I had never once said to my mother in 40 years, and I had to find the strength to say it to her face. I practiced it in my car. I practiced it the way you rehearse a language you were never taught. No, just that. No. It sounds absurd. A grown woman practicing a single syllable in her parked car. But if you have ever been the one who could not say it, you understand. The word was not in me. It had been trained out so early and so completely that my whole body resisted it, the way a hand resists touching a hot stove. Every time I imagined my mother's face falling, my chest went tight and the old script rose up, ready to take it back, to soften it, to add a yes underneath the no, the way I always had. So I practiced saying it bare, with no apology attached, no explanation, no escape hatch for either of us. No, a complete sentence, the first complete sentence of my own I would ever say to her. The day it happened, there was no audience. That is what I want you to understand. There was no dramatic dinner, no family gathered around a table, no room full of witnesses. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and it was just the two of us in my mother's kitchen. The same kitchen where she had taught me to do everything except ask for anything. She had the realtor's card already on the counter. She had circled a date on the calendar. She was so certain of my yes that she had already begun to spend it. She slid the card across the counter toward me, and she said, "I told the realtor you would call this week. The sooner you list it, the sooner we can get you settled in here." And I looked at my mother, and I did not raise my voice, because the women in stories like mine never need to. I said, "No, Mom, I'm not going to sell my house, and I'm not going to move in here." The kitchen went very quiet. I do not think she had heard the word from me before in her life. She blinked at me the way you blink at a number that does not add up, and then she did what she had always done. She reached for the old lever, the one that had worked for 40 years. "Dana," she said, with that wounded softness, "after everything I've done for you, I never thought you'd be the selfish one. Your sister would never." And there it was, the word she had used my whole life to make me pay. Selfish. For wanting to keep the one thing that was mine. For declining to liquidate my entire life so that the daughter she favored could inherit it. For 40 years, that single word had been enough to make me set down whatever I was holding and pick up whatever she handed me. It was the only tool she had ever needed, and she reached for it now the way you reach for a light switch in a room you have lived in your whole life, without even looking, certain it would work. But this time, the word did not land the way it always had. Because for the first time, I had the books open in front of me, in my own mind, and I knew the truth of every line. I did not get angry. Anger was not what I felt. What I felt was the strange, level calm of a person reading a total she has checked 3 times and knows is correct. I said, "Mom, I have done your taxes for 20 years. I paid for your roof. I have bailed Brooke out 11 times. I drove myself to the hospital with pneumonia while you were at her house. I have given this family everything I have. And you are asking me to give you the last thing I own so that Brooke can have it when you're gone. I'm not the selfish one. I never have been. I was just the one you never had to worry about. And I'm telling you now, gently, that you should have worried about me too." She did not have an answer for that. "There is no answer for the truth," said quietly, by someone who has finally stopped being afraid of it. She looked at the realtor's card on the counter, and then at me, and something moved behind her eyes that I had never seen there before, aimed at me. It was uncertainty. For the first time in her life, my mother did not know what I was going to do next, because for the first time in her life, I was not doing what she expected. I told her I loved her. I meant it. I told her I would still be her daughter, that I would call, that I would come for dinner, that I would help her find real care, the kind a family arranges together, not the kind they extract from the one child they decided did not count. But I would not be selling my house. I would not be moving into my childhood bedroom to spend the next decade as unpaid staff. I was done being the line they drew against. The account was closed. And then I picked up my purse, and I left the realtor's card sitting on her counter, and I drove home to my own house, and I sat in my own kitchen, in the quiet that was mine, and I did not feel like the selfish one. I felt like a woman who had finally been handed back to herself. I would love to tell you my mother saw it all in that moment, that she chased me to the door, that she understood. She did not. People do not transform in a single afternoon, especially not at 70. For weeks, she did not call. Brooke called, though, furious, to tell me I had broken our mother's heart, that I was abandoning the family, that I had always been cold. I let her say all of it. I did not argue. I had spent 40 years explaining myself, and I was finished. I simply said that if our mother needed care, then there were 2 daughters in this family, and it was Brooke's turn to be the one who showed up. There was a long silence on the line, and then Brooke said the most honest thing she has ever said to me. She said, "But you're the one who does that." You're the one who does that. 5 words. And they contained the whole architecture of my life. I was not a person to them. I was a function, and the function had finally stopped. I hung up the phone and I waited for the guilt to come, the way it always had. And it did come, in waves, for days. But underneath the guilt was something I had not felt in 40 years, something so unfamiliar it took me a while to name it. It was relief. The relief of a person who has set down a weight so heavy and so old that she had forgotten her own back could straighten. Here is the part I did not plan, the part no folder could have predicted. 3 months later, my mother fell. It was not serious. A fractured wrist, a night in the hospital for observation, but she was frightened, and she was alone, and she needed someone. And for the first time in her life, she did not call me. I think she could not, after the kitchen, after the no. So she called the daughter she had always saved for, the one she had poured 40 years of love and money and worry into, the one she was selling my house to provide for. She called her golden child. She called Brooke. And Brooke did not come. Brooke had the children. You see, Brooke had a thing that weekend. Brooke was sympathetic and sorry and 3 hours away, and somehow none of it ever turned into Brooke actually arriving. My mother lay in a hospital bed and waited for the favorite to walk through the door. And the favorite did not walk through the door, because the favorite had never once in her life been the kind of person who walks through doors for other people. She had only ever been the kind of person other people walk through doors for. My mother had spent 4 decades building her whole security on a daughter who would not come, and dismissing the one who always would. And now she was lying in a hospital bed at 70 years old, learning the difference the hard way, in the dark, alone. Everything I could never prove by arguing, her own life proved for me in a single weekend. I did go to the hospital. I want you to know that, because this was never a story about revenge, and I am not built to leave my mother frightened and alone, whatever she had done. But I did not go as the dependable one. I went as a daughter, on my own terms, with my own boundaries, and we both knew the difference. I sat with her, and I held the wrist that was not broken, and neither of us said anything for a long time. And then my mother, who had never in her life said she was sorry to me, looked at the ceiling and said the truest thing she had ever managed. She said, "I always knew you would be the one to come." And I understood that she meant it as love, and also that it was the exact problem, the whole problem, the problem of my entire life, said out loud at last. She had always known I would come, and she had built her whole life on never once having to wonder why. I did not correct her. I did not list the ledger for her there in that hospital room, because she had finally, in her own way, read it herself. The woman who had spent 40 years certain I would always come had just spent one terrible night discovering what it feels like to call out and have no one answer. And there is no lecture in the world that teaches what that night had taught her. I just held her hand, but I held it as a person who could also, on another day, choose not to. That was the only thing that had changed, and it had changed everything. Things are different now, between my mother and me, though not in the tidy way stories promise. She has not become a different woman, but she has stopped reaching for that lever, because the one time she truly needed it, it was Brooke who failed to appear, and me who walked through the door, and even she could no longer pretend she did not see the books. She helps arrange her own care now. She thanks me when I come, instead of expecting me. Last month, she asked me how I was doing, and then she waited for the answer, and she had not done that in so long that I did not know what to say. It was small, but after 40 years of being the one no one had to worry about, a single, honest question from my mother felt like being seen for the first time. I kept my house. I sit in it most evenings, in the quiet that belongs to me, and I think about the ledger I carried for so long, and how the whole time I was adding up what I had given, I never once thought to ask whether I was allowed to keep anything for myself. I always was. I just never sent myself the invoice. I still help my mother, I want to be clear about that, because somewhere out there is a woman listening who is afraid that setting a boundary means becoming heartless, and it does not. I show up, but I show up as a daughter who has a life of her own, a house of her own, a no of her own when she needs it, and that has not made me love my mother less. It has made the love real for the first time, because love you are allowed to refuse is the only kind that was ever freely given. The years I spent unable to say no were not years of love. They were years of payment. I know the difference now, and I will never confuse the two again. If you have spent your life being the strong one, the dependable one, the child who was loved for what you could carry, I want you to hear me. You were never selfish for wanting to be cared for too. The strength they praised in you was only ever the sound of you paying a debt that was never yours. And the day you finally close that account and keep something for yourself, you will not have stopped being a good daughter. You will simply have remembered that you were always a daughter and never the bill.